Hello, I am speaking with the amazing Kiwi author Ivy Cliffwater. Hello.
Hi.
I thought we could just start off with doing a little introduction about who you are, what you write, and where people may know you from.
Well, I'm Ivy Cliffwater and I'm a Romantasy author. I have my first book came out last year in 2025, October. And it's the first book in a duology, The Shadow Weaver. And then book two was released this year in May, The Storm Weaver. So I live right here in New Zealand, in Auckland, and yeah.
The Shadow Weaver is like still in the top 20, and the Stormweaver is also in there, I just saw. What is that like as your first duology, your first releases, or being so popular?
It doesn't feel quite real. I didn't know what to expect when I published my first book, which is, you know, most debut authors probably say the same thing. But I'm glad that it's being received well because romantasy hasn't really shown up much among New Zealand authors. I think I was the first romantasy author that Moa Press published. And I mean, I love the genre. So I love seeing that there's other authors now being picked up who are also writing fantasy and romance because I think New Zealanders for a long time have not been too receptive to adult fantasy or romance in general. But I feel like things are changing now. And that, I guess that proves, what's happening with sales and how well the books are doing, that readers are looking for those kind of books from New Zealand authors.
Yeah, I didn't realize you were the first of Moa to be published that is a romantasy. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I was surprised that they were, about to give me an offer because I was like, oh, this is a bit unexpected. But I mean, I was amazed by it and really happy to work with them. So they're a great publishing company. So yeah.
What does it feel like to be the first on their list then? Does that feel like a lot of pressure or was there like a real excitement about it?
I think there was a lot of excitement. I think there was a lot of learning also with what that particular audience expect from a romantasy, and that comes from like covers and promotions and where to find these romantasy authors in New Zealand. Sorry, readers in New Zealand. Um, yeah, and I think it was quite collaborative. Like I had a lot of say on the covers and how the arcs looked and how we were going to do that. I was really lucky to get arcs and gold foiling. Yeah.
It is a beautiful arc.
There's so few of them out there in the world. Even I only got one, so that's how rare they are. So yeah, and we discussed about pre-order incentives to, sort of see what would work with romance readers, what they would like. And I ended up writing a bonus chapter, and we got some beautiful artwork done by a New Zealand artist who made these like tarot kite cards of all the different weavers that are in the sort of Shadow Weaver, Storm Weaver world, and she did an amazing job. And they were put in with the arcs, which was very unique. I haven't seen anyone else get, sort of. Um, I haven't seen that before, so I think I was very lucky to be able to have that. And I think they were testing the waters and finding out what those particular readers are interested in.
Yeah, and I mean, it did really well. The books are super successful. Those tarot cards that you speak of are adorable. I have them. I need to put them on my wall, actually. Um, what did it feel like when they came to you with that offer? Were you just like immediate yes, or was there some hesitancy?
I was a little hesitant, which is crazy, like, but I had planned to like this is the Shadow Weaver was the first book I'd ever written. And I knew that the romantasy genre was very big in the indie world, but it was only just kind of showing up in trad publishing. And I was worried that an audience for, my books wouldn't be going to the store to find it in the bookstore. So that was something I had to think about. I know this sounds awful, but I think I lacked confidence thinking, I didn't even query, like they reached out to me and asked to read my manuscript.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, they found me on Instagram. Really, I must have caught their attention with something, just a hook or just talking about my book. And they approached me and said, "Hey, and we know you're about to self-publish, but can we, have a look at your manuscript?" And I thought, well, I'll send it to them because maybe they could give me some feedback. And I thought it was kind of an honor to be even asked, whatever came out of it. And so I sent it to them. I think it was on a Wednesday, and I heard back from them on the Monday, and
Wow.
we have a meeting. And I had an offer very quickly after that. So, and then, yeah, the decision came, do I go ahead with self-publishing or do I take the offer? And there was a lot of other considerations. It's very expensive to self-publish if you want really good quality editors. Covers aren't cheap, but also there's a lot of time that you don't get paid for and the marketing and putting yourself out there. And I've run my own business before and I know how hard that is. And self-publishing is a business. And, I was like, do I really want to go down that route? Or do I want to sort of be able to just sit back and write and let someone take care of finding the editor and the covers and things like that? That was a big motivation as well. Um, so yeah, I mean, it ended up being amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I did that. But it's also, I think, publishing and going trad is difficult as well. I think I found out how difficult it is. And there is so much to learn. There's the lingo that you don't understand. There's like, it's a big learning
Yeah.
curve, whether you're self-publishing or trad publishing. And the idea that I had that I was just going to be able to sit back and just write all the time that's not actually true either. There's lots of these kind of interviews, events that, you need to put yourself out there, go to bookstores, meet booksellers, meet readers. There's a lot more in festivals, like all these things I never even thought of. Is hard work, but the payoff is having someone DM you on Instagram and tell you how your book made them cry and made them think about things and they're always really proud when they get to the end of the book and see my bio and realize that I'm a New Zealand author. They're like, "Oh my gosh, that's like a romantasy author in New Zealand. That's amazing." So that those little DMs and things like that just, make it worth all the hard work that you put into it. Yeah.
And it is cool that, people are picking up this book and not realizing you are a small Kiwi author. Because sometimes I think that there is almost a perception about, oh, maybe when it's local, it's the same in music, it's in the same in TV and film. When it's local, we're like, oh, like maybe it's not going to be as good. But then
Mm.
having that, I mean, obviously it's amazing, it's doing so well, but having that at the end of a book and realizing that, that's such a cool thing.
Yeah, and also seeing my book um, reaching to other parts of the world, even though it's only published in New Zealand and Australia and the UK. I've had someone who picked it up while they were in Australia from the library and then read the first one and then went back to France and really contacted me, said, "How can I get a hold of book two?" And she's like, "I love it. You're just, it's my favorite book." And I really, she did manage to get a hold of it. I had someone who whose father picked up the books and sent them to her in Canada, which her dad did that for her. And I'm like, God, that must have cost a fortune. But she had read the first one while she was here in New Zealand and went back to Canada, and her father sent her the second one when it came out. So it's interesting how people are picking it up outside New Zealand. It's kind of spreading its way around the world.
Yeah, and I guess that is also the magic of social media. People are finding you that way as well and asking you how they can get it. Speaking of romantasy and obviously the Shadow Weaver, give me us a quick little run through of the synopsis of the Shadow Weaver, and then we'll get into the romantasy of it all.
So, the Shadow Weaver is about a 6 foot woman blacksmith who disguises herself as a knight and enters a medieval tournament in the hopes of finding the man who killed her mother. And she manages to get herself caught up in some political intrigue, which also includes a broody, dark-haired, dimpled army captain and a marshmallow sweetie of a blacksmith. And yeah, you're following Karis's journey as she discovers the type of person she is, what she's capable of, and she goes through a lot of, I would say, trauma, some obstacles.
She does, she sure does.
But in the Stormweaver book two, she does get her a happy ending eventually.
She just has to really, really fight for it.
She does, but she's strong. Like that's the biggest feedback I get from people is Karis is their favorite because she's so strong and but she's also quite vulnerable and there's a lot of layers to her. And I swear she's the one that wrote the book. She just told me what her choices are and what she wanted to do, and I was just like, okay, that's what you want. I'll write that down.
I love that. And obviously you chose romantasy. What was the thinking behind that? But also a 6 foot something female lead. What was the decision there?
It wasn't a decision. She came to me. But if you know me and know the kind of books that I read and what I craved when I was younger, and YA, um, I was a teenager in the 90s. There wasn't really a lot of YA books. And I was thinking the other day, one of the ones that probably influenced me quite a lot, and I could see a lot of Karis in this character, is another New Zealand author called Tessa Duda. And she did the Alex series, which was about a broad-shouldered, taller than average woman who competes in the Olympics. I think she starts off at when she's like 15. She's a swimmer. And I remember being so caught up in that book. And I totally forgot about it. And then it came across, I think it was like in an ad or something. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I thought about the book and the character. I'm like, oh my, there's no wonder that I really gravitate to writing strong female protagonists, because clearly right from a young age, I was searching for that.
And I feel like a lot of the readers too are also searching for that. I found her incredible. She was so strong. She goes through so much, like you say, but still is making sure everyone else around her is happy, healthy, safe. She's doing everything she can and, you know, getting her happily ever after eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I think I quite enjoyed writing about a 20-something-year-old who's in these extraordinary circumstances, and what she could be what she's capable of doing. And I think there's a lot of those kinds of romantic protagonists who are feisty, but I feel there's that quiet confidence in Karis that maybe those kinds of protagonists don't have. Well, I hope that's how she comes across to
Yeah.
people. That's how I see her myself. I mean, there was a bit of worry about people liking a 6 foot woman blacksmith, but to me, she just was someone who took up space in the world and was very proud to take that space out. And the men around her think she's hot and they want to, they hype her up. That's what they do because, true love and relationships, that's what your partner does, that's you may think is a flaw, but they see it as a thing to be admired about you. And I feel like I really wanted to show that no matter how tall you are, you can be in a romantasy, but because
And that's the thing.
I had a lot of women who actually were, when I was about to indie publish and I had a street team, a lot of them were very tall women and 6 foot. And that was why they were following me because they were so excited to see someone, a tall woman, in a romantasy book.
Yeah, I feel like that's the thing, right? Like so many of these novels have these smaller, petite, almost like elf or fairy-like female characters. And yeah, sometimes they do chuck around a sword or whatever, but they are still somewhat diminished in themselves. And I think that Karis is just not that. Like, if
No,
someone doesn't like her, she doesn't care. She's moving on. She's getting it done.
yeah. I didn't want her to be insecure about her height or her.
No. Because tall people exist in the world and they need representation too.
Wonderful people. I am not one of them.
It's not us.
Interesting how many people have come to book events and stuff, and I'm like, no, I'm nothing like my character. I am not tall, super confident, or very sporty or agile, and I definitely don't know how to make a sword or wield one. So it was definitely not a self-insert book, but it was yeah, it was just a character who came to me very strongly, and I just really wanted to tell her story.
I feel like I can see her barging her way through and being like, write this.
It felt like that sometimes. I did change the ending of book two, The Stormweaver, because she did have to make quite a big decision. And I didn't like how it was going. And I was like, okay, Karis, who are you? What do you want? Is this the what you really, really want? And I really thought about her as a character, as a person, how much she'd grown from book one to book two, and thought, what would she really want? And I don't think what she wanted had changed as much. She
Mm.
kind of, I don't want to give away the ending, but I I I feel that she changed in a lot of ways, but what she really, really wanted was still this life that she had imagined at the start. Yeah.
Interesting. Um, Aside from Karis being quite unique, this is also a duology, which I feel like in the world of fantasy and romantasy at the moment doesn't happen that often. I feel like we get four, five, six, sometimes if you're Nalini Singh, 18 book series. What made you stick to a duology?
I mean, I'm a new writer,
Mm.
and I think I'm will always be learning the craft and learning to write. And I think I set myself a challenge to write a complete story in 2 books as a duology. Um, and I think that was a good start for me. Uh, while I was writing book one, book two was already forming on what was going to happen. So I wasn't physically writing book two, but as I was writing book one, I knew what was going to happen in book two because it was just, so book two, I was able to write very quickly, apart from the ending change that I did.
Yeah.
Had to go back and change. And I just really enjoyed it. I liked getting I liked having a completed story in 2 books with one couple. I feel like the romance arc works really well with 2 books. I feel when it comes to romantasy, it is always a real challenge of getting the right balance of romance and fantasy. And, it's an epic fantasy, so there needs to be enough world building, and it can be challenging to do it in 1 book or even 2 books. And I can understand why there's a lot of authors who do so many books because with each book the world can get bigger and more can be included. But I think it was also a good challenge. It was good for me to learn to keep it to 2 books, and I mean, it was the right amount for me. I think I get bored quite quickly as well. I mean, you can probably tell when you read my books, they're quite fast-paced because that's how my brain works. I'm quite a fast-paced person. I'm either 100% go or I'm zero. So I think 2 books was the right thing for me. Duology was a good challenge for me, and I really enjoyed keeping it to those 2 books.
Well, also as a reader, I'm glad you kept it to two because sometimes when there are too many books, it really does get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then I'm forgetting things.
Yeah, I have so many series on my bookshelf right now. Amazing. But chances I've only read two of them.
Same.
I've brought the whole lot and they're sitting there and I just feel guilty. And what do? A new series comes out and I read the first book in that series and I don't finish it. So I love that there's both my books are out now because when people read their first book, they can go straight on to book two and know it's completed. They're not having to wait, for another year for the next book or in another year. But it also means I get to move on and do something different as well, which is always exciting.
Yeah, exactly. Um, for anyone who is wanting to be a writer or currently writing something and not sure where to go, what was your inspiration to get yourself up every day, write more, make it happen?
Just wanting to learn the story, wanting to find out what happened to Karis. I wanted to know about the characters. I was purely just driven by the enjoyment of writing. Like I had the first time in my life, I actually had the time to sit down and just write. And that was a real privilege for me. And so I didn't need to push myself to
Yeah.
write. It was just pouring out of me because, here I was 45 years old. I closed my business, and I was like, kind of, what am I going to do now? And I was doing a lot of things. I was reading a lot more. I took a pottery workshop. I took a powerlifting. I did like so many different things. And writing, I started doing that, and then I started writing more and more and more, and those other things kind of went to the side.
Oh my
And
gosh,
I,
powerlifting. No wonder Karis came to you. I feel like she would love some powerlifting.
yeah, I think maybe at that time when I said to people, "Oh, I've entered a powerlifting competition." I'm still a beginner. I was still learning, but I was just giving it a go. And I think I was getting a bit annoyed. I think people get confused with what powerlifting is and bodybuilding is, and they would say things like, "Aren't you afraid you're going to get really big and muscular?" And I was like, "No." And they're like, "Well, what would your husband think about it?" And I was like, "Does it matter?" And this is other women saying this to me, and I think that little things like that fired me up and probably went into the book of
Yeah.
why is it that only men get to go to the gym and lift heavy and get muscles, but when a woman does it, it's like, should
No. Whereas those men in the book are like, more muscle, the better.
yeah, they want a strong woman. We
Yeah.
like strong women. And anyone who's like who decides to have a moment of putting Karis down, the men in her life definitely make sure that he gets put in his place, which we love men who do that,
Yeah.
who defend a woman's right to do things like weightlifting or enter a tournament,
Yeah. Try and get revenge. Yeah.
kill the bad guy.
Do you have any tips for any wannabe writers?
I think it's okay to take your time. Like I said, I got writing a lot later in life. I think people feel guilty because they're working and they've got kids and they just can't put as much time into writing as they would like. And I feel like there will be a time in your life where it will become a priority. If you really, really want it, you will make time for it. And I don't think anyone should ever feel guilty for not doing something that they enjoy doing. That's the other side of it is don't feel guilty about doing something like writing. It is creative. It's not a waste of time. And every time you start something or write a book, you've learned something from it. Even if it's not something you want to publish or show anyone, you've learned something from that. And you can write another one later on, but there's no rush, there's no hurry. It's about enjoying the process. And if you don't enjoy the process, maybe you don't really want to be a writer. I know that's really harsh. But when in the age of AI and people are getting AI to write their books, I'm just like, well, then you're not really a writer because that's the part we writers love is the creating and the writing. If you're doing it, you're really just trying to be a business. You want the credit and the money rather than enjoying the act of writing. So that went on a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, it's a great answer and it's a great point. There's not a limit on how old someone needs to be to put out a book. Like
Mhm.
you can be 16, you can be 60. There's not, as long
Yeah.
as you're passionate about it and you have a story to tell.
And if you do the average age of a woman writing is about late 30s, early 40s, which is funny because we see so many young people being shown huge success, but that I think that's just because social media loves seeing someone young and talented have this huge amount of success, but there's lots of authors who come to it quite late in life. Because we dedicate so much, as women especially, we dedicate so much of ourselves taking care of others in our lives. I know that was very much my path in life. I had children to look after, I had a family, to support financially. So there was a lot of that I know a lot of other women experience.
Mm.
So I think it's not unusual that it would be later in life that we would take up writing.
And you also then bring all that life experience with you when you're writing. And I think that can also mean that you write a much fuller and more like involved story as well.
Yeah, I don't I dread to think of what I would have written at 20. I think there wouldn't be a lot of emotion or insight at 20. I mean, I was a pretty mature 20-year-old, but even then, it was, I don't think I would have been able to bring justice to something like The Shadow Weaver or The Storm Weaver. And I've read a lot of books since then.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
a
the
lot of
thing
it
too.
reading really does help you. And I've been exposed to so many books and, and that definitely helps. So many stories. And you learn as you go what you like, what you don't like.
Yeah. Um, why do you think that people should read Romantasy?
I think with romantasy, it is a good gateway into fantasy if you're a romance author. I've had people who picked up The Shadow Weaver and it was the first romantasy that they ever read. And they were surprised at how accessible because I think fantasy can be quite intimidating. So I think that can really help. There is also a lot of fantasy readers who do like a bit of romance in their books, and romantasy kind of bridges that gap. So if some romantasy has so many, it's changed a lot over the years, and there's so many different ways to tell a story in romantasy. So many, I guess you would even call it subgenres in another genre as well. So some of the romantasies are much more fantasy forward and some much more romance forward. So they probably appeal to different readers. But yeah, I think if you're a romance reader and you wanted to dabble your toe in fantasy, romantasy is a good gateway. And then before you know it, you'll be reading all of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And no, I'm just kidding.
A little less
Even I
romantical.
haven't read them. I watched the movies.
It counts. I do think that the Shadow Weaver and the Storm Weaver, I don't know why I keep tripping that. I do think that the Shadow Weaver and the Storm Weaver are both a very good gateway into romantasy as well. There is the world building, there are those fantasy elements that, like myself, when I first started in fantasy, those are the harder elements to kind of adapt to when you have just been reading contemporary romance or contemporary fiction. But yours are the perfect mixture of a lovely romantic story, the fantasy elements, but also Karis is such an attainable character to relate to that I think that also makes that really easy to read.
If you can get readers to connect with your characters, then I feel things like the fantasy side and the romance side just works. It clicks. I'm more very much a character first kind of writer, but I'm also a plot writer. So I think romantasy works quite well for me because it can be a bit of a balance. Like I could not write just a character-driven romance. I don't think I could do contemporary romance. I need higher stakes. I love reading it. I just don't think I could read it. And that is because, I need the higher stakes and I need not just character, but also plot. I'm not saying that romance doesn't have a plot, but it is a lot more about
Yeah.
characters themselves, the romance itself. So yeah, but I can see why romance readers might struggle with fantasy. But the thing with the Shadow Weaver and the Storm Weaver, it could almost feel like a historical novel at times because, there's castles, there's knights, there's that sort of touchstone of people can relate to it and be like, oh, that's kind of a bit like Games of Thrones, or that's a bit like A Knight's Tale. It's a very popular movie, and there's little elements. I think if it clicks with people, it makes it easier for them to pick up the fantasy elements.
Yeah, I also think I was really like, am I going to be drawn into these worlds when I know, like the dragons and not in your book, but in the dragons and the fairies and all of that, I know they're not real. So am I going to believe these stories? But you do, and like with the Shadow Weaver, because it is so character forward, you do believe in her, and then you believe in all the powers and such.
Yeah, I think that is one of the big things that they teach with writing is if you can make them believe in one impossible thing, then you've caught them. That's how you catch your reader in fantasy. So the fact that my writing's quite descriptive because I want to catch your imagination straight away. And I think that that works quite well at bringing in people who are maybe newer to fantasy.
Well, I have had a wonderful time talking to you about the Shadow Weaver, which is part of the We Read Besties collection. So everyone can go and race and get it right now, and then read the Storm Weaver because it's also out.
Thank you for having me.